And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is the top 10 commanders from Innistrad Crimson Vow. Overall, I thought this was a pretty good set for Commander. More so the cards in the 99, though. Lots of great cards for Commander in this set. I honestly think that Wizards of the Coast has really been bringing the power level down on a lot of these Commanders, possibly because of some of the mistakes they made in years past with going a little overboard. So now maybe they're compensating a little bit. I'm actually going to make a video regarding this, so I'll save that diatribe for another day. Ultimately, though, I don't think any of the commanders from this set are going to be pushing up into, the top commanders in the entire format. However, there are some very interesting ones, and as I always do with these lists, for me, it's more about build around and how interesting these commanders make for building a deck. So I'm going to start out with an honorable mention, Jacob Hauken Inspector, 1 in a blue, human advisor, 0-2. Tap, draw a card, then exile a card from your hand face down. You may look at that card for as long as it remains exiled. You may pay 6. If you do, transform Jacob Hauken Inspector. And when you transform him, it becomes Hauken's Insight Legendary Enchantment. So it's an enchantment on the back. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library face down. You may look at that card for as long as it remains exiled. Once during each of your turns, you may play a land or cast a spell from among the cards exiled with this permanent without paying its mana cost. So obviously this is a very interesting card, and it can be a very powerful card. Once during each of your turns, you may play a land card, or probably more likely you're going to cast a spell from among those cards for free, which is amazing. If you can set it up so that you can get an Omniscience or something off the top, that would be great. I think that might be the best way to go with this deck because it takes a lot to flip this guy, right? You got to pay 6, and once you flip it, if it gets destroyed, and of course, creatures and enchantments are both easily destroyed, so your opponents can kill this as a creature. Once it's flipped, they can kill it as an enchantment. And the wording here, you may play land cards and cast spells from among the cards exiled with this permanent without paying its mana cost, means that once this is removed, everything else that you've exiled with it no longer is counted, right? As soon as you replay your commander, you're starting fresh again. So all that stuff you've exiled is now gone forever. So big drawback here, right? This is one of those commanders where it can be fantastic, but also I think you can really sputter out and not accomplish a whole lot if your opponents happen to be playing a lot of removal. Getting to the list, coming in at number 10, Helena Elena, partners. 2, a red and a green, human ranger, 2/3 first strike with reach. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put X +1/+1 counters on another target creature you control, where X is Helena Elena's power. That creature gains haste until end of turn. I really like this as a commander. As I said in my spoiler video already, it's very comparable to Xenagos, so you can do a similar theme to Xenagos in this deck as well. However, you can also go different directions. So for example, you can pump up the power on your commander to add more counters. That's another thing you can do with this deck, right? With Xenagos, you're basically taking big creatures and making them bigger. With Helena and Elena, you can take small creatures and make them a lot better, which I like. You also can do a +1/+1 counters theme here, and that's what I really like about this. Doing a +1/+1 counter themes in red and green. I like when they go a little bit off color with stuff. Really easy to do a +1/+1 counter theme in blue-green or white-green. You don't see it that much in red-green, so that allows you to use maybe some red cards that fit this theme a lot better that maybe you haven't seen before. I really like it for that reason. Coming in at number 9, Donald Herald of Wings, 2 blue, human wizard, 3/3. This is a really interesting one. Whenever you cast a non-legendary creature spell with flying, you may copy it, except the copy is a 1/1 spirit in addition to its other types. Do this only once each turn. So a really interesting card. You're in a couple different themes here. I mean, you're in a flying theme, right? You got to do flying creatures here. You're not going to get anything out of your commander. Has to be non-legendary. I don't think that's a big drawback. You can only do it once each turn, but I don't think that is as much of a drawback, right? All you need to do is cast it on your opponent's turns. And of course, you can easily do that with creatures that have flash. So what you need to do is add a bunch of creatures that have flash and flying. Brazen Borer, there's a great one. Dream Eater's another fantastic one. Having creatures with ETBs is going to be extra good here, right? Because you're getting that copy, so you're going to get another ETB trigger. There's lots of spirits. These are spirits that you're making, don't forget. So Nebelgast Herald, for example, is a spirit, has flash, has flying, also has that ETB, so that's going to be a great fit. I think you can go a spirit tribal here. You could also go a fairy tribal. There is a lot of fairy creatures with flash and flying, so you could actually make a mono blue fairy tribal deck with this commander, and I think it would be really good. Or maybe you could do both spirit and fairy. That would be an interesting deck. It's a very unique commander. I absolutely love the art. Super cool looking card. And I really like that you can go a couple of different ways with it. I always like that in a commander. Coming in at number 8, we got partner with commanders, and there was a couple of these, one in each of the pre-con decks. This is the red and black pair. Camber the Plunderer, 3 and a black vampire rogue, 3/4, has of course partner with Loreen the Diversion and lifelink. Whenever a creature dies, you gain 1 life and create a blood token. So whenever any creature dies is a really fantastic trigger, right? This is token creatures, this is your creatures, your opponent's creatures. You're going to be getting this trigger a lot. The blood tokens are a little wah-wah, right? As probably have been noted by a lot of other people already. They're not great. I would have liked to see them go in a different direction with the blood tokens. Just pay 1, discard a card, and then sacrifice it, and then draw a card is not great. It's like a worse clue. I don't love it. I would have really liked them to go in a completely different direction with it, like sacrifice, regenerate target creature or something like that. I think that would have been interesting, rather than just doing looting, which I don't know what that has to do with blood. However, you are creating those artifact tokens, which is really important for the partner here. Loreen the Diversion, 2 and a red human rogue, 3/3, and this is probably the card that you're going to more build the deck around. Of course, she has partner with Camber the Plunderer and first strike, and you can pay 2, sacrifice an artifact or creature, goad target creature. That's a fantastic ability. Interestingly enough, it is very similar to the Stranger Things card that just came out recently, Lucas the Sharpshooter. He has tap, sacrifice an artifact. Lucas the Sharpshooter deals 1 damage to target creature, goad that creature. Very similar abilities. You're sacking artifacts, you're goading, so I guess if you have a Lucas deck, Loreen could definitely go in that deck by herself, obviously without her partner. But like I said, she's got the really interesting ability there, right? Sacrifice an artifact or creature. Of course, you can sacrifice your own creatures to Loreen's ability, and then when they die, you're going to get a trigger off of Camber, and you're going to get that blood token. So they do work synergistically there really nice, so I like that as well. Definitely an interesting build around. Coming in at number 7, Millicent, Restless, Revenant, 5 white, blue, Spirit Soldier 4/4. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each spirit you control, has flying, and whenever Millicent, Restless, Revenant, or another non-token spirit you control dies or deals combat damage to a player, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. So again, I talked about this guy at length in my spoiler video. I think it's a fantastic spirit commander. Really the best one. I mean, we've had some spirit commanders. I don't think they're great. This is the one that to me is a really dedicated spirit commander. Kamigawa commanders are technically spirit commanders. I don't know if they're great ones. This is a dedicated spirit commander. I think it's the first real great one we've had. You're making lots of spirits. If your non-token spirits die, you get to make another spirit to replace it, which I think is great. Having sort of board wipe protection when you're in a creature heavy deck, which this will be, is always going to be great. Another really interesting build around coming in at number 6, a Ruth, Tormented Prophet, 1 blue and a red human wizard, 2/4. If you would draw a card, exile the top 2 cards of your library instead. You may play those cards this turn. So man, I really wish they had made this green. So a teamer commander. Then I could have used my Song of Creation idea, right? The idea I had in one of my 10 deck ideas video where I'm drawing tons of cards, but at the end of my turn, I have to discard my hand. So I guess if you were doing that deck idea and it was in teamer colors, Ruth would go in there. You can still use some of the cards that I mentioned in that video, like Grafted Skullcap, for example, where I'm drawing extra cards, but then at the end of my turn, I discard them. Ideas Unbound is another great one there. Blue and a blue, Sorcery Arcane, draw 3 cards, then discard 3 cards at the end of turn. So you're going to pay 2 mana and exile 6 cards from the top of your library, and then you get to play them. Discarding 3 cards at the end of turn isn't going to matter if you have no cards in hand. So I would probably engineer this deck for not having cards in my hand. You could even go Hellbent. Again, this card's not black, unfortunately. Most of the best Hellbent cards are in black, but you could go that direction a little bit as well. You got to be a little careful here though, right? This can get difficult. You know, a Ristic Study, for example, is not going to be that great in this deck. It'll trigger on your opponent's turn, and if you would draw a card, you exile the top 2 cards of your library, and you may play those cards this turn. So you have to play those 2 cards on your opponent's turn, which you probably won't be able to do unless they're instants and you have the mana open, right? If your opponent's wheel, then you're really going to get screwed, right? Because they're going to cast the wheel, obviously, on their turn. You're going to exile the top 14 cards of your library. You can play them on their turn, but of course, course, are you going to be able to do that? And if you can't, now your entire hand is gone, right? So got to be really careful with this. It can be super, super dangerous. I think you're definitely going to want a Vidalcan Orrery or Leyline of Anticipation in this deck. If you're drawing cards on your opponent's turn, you want to be able to maybe cast them, right? I think maybe the win con for this deck, though, is probably a Labman sort of scenario where I just go nuts with the drawing and exile my whole library. Really interesting commander. A lot of big upside, but can be super dangerous. You got to be careful with it. Coming in at number 5, Olivia Crimson Bride. 4 black, red, Vampire Noble 3/4, flying in haste. Whenever Olivia Crimson Bride attacks, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped and attacking. It gains. Whenever you don't control a legendary vampire, exile this creature. And as I talked about my spoiler video, I really like that little part on the end where instead of the typical sacrifice at the end of turn or exile at the end of turn, it's if you don't control a legendary vampire. And of course, Olivia is one, but you can also put other legendary vampires in this deck. I think that's fantastic. You can fill your deck with legendary vampires. In fact, you could even go a legendary vampire tribal. There's actually 28 legendary vampires in Rakdos colors, so you could just fill your deck with them. And when they come into play, you're always going to control a legendary vampire as long as they're in play. So basically, they're protecting themselves because they're a legendary vampire. So they're going to get exiled whenever they would normally leave the battlefield anyway, right? So you're really just negating that downside. Love that she's got haste, right? So we can get that attack trigger right away. Obviously, you want to fill your graveyard here. Just a lot of different ways you can go with this. You can go completely vampire tribal or not vampire tribal at all. That's what I really like about it. Great commander, fantastic build around. But coming in at number 4, Grolnok the Omnivore. 2, a green and a blue. Frog 3/3. Whenever a frog you control attacks, mill 3 cards. Whenever a permanent card is put into your graveyard from your library, exile it with a croak counter on it. You may play lands and cast spells from among cards you own in exile with croak counters on them. So again, just like Olivia, this is one where, yes, I can play Frog Tribal with this, which makes for a fun and interesting deck, right? There is 23 frog creatures in the game. So you can actually go Frog Tribal. Obviously, you can use Changelings as well if you want to. But also, you can just not do frogs at all, right? Whenever a frog you control attacks, mill 3 cards, that can just be your commander doing that ability. Ability you really want to build around here is whenever a permanent card is put into your graveyard from your library, exile it with a croak counter on it. It doesn't have to be from a frog attacking. It can be for any reason. Just like I did with my Slogurk deck, you can traumatize yourself here, right? You do that, and now you've just put half of your library into exile with croak counters on them, and you can play those cards for as long as your commander's on the battlefield, right? As soon as you exile them with the croak counters on them, they're gonna stay that way, very similar to a Paco and Haldan deck. So you just got to make sure your commander's on the battlefield, and then all of those cards are available for you to play. And of course, having 40 or however many cards in exile that you have access to that you can play, of course, is going to be incredibly powerful. So yes, you can make a goofy, interesting Frog Tribal deck with this, but you can also make a pretty high-powered deck with this, I think. Coming in at number 3 is Runo Stromkirk. 1 blue and a black vampire cleric, 1/4 with flying. When Runo Stromkirk enters the battlefield, put up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card if a creature card with mana value 6 or greater is revealed this way, transform. And when you do, it becomes Crothus, Lord of the Deep. 3/5 Kraken Horror with flying. And again, it's a little weird that you have this Kraken that looks like it's coming out of the ocean that has flying. Whatever. When Crothus, Lord of the Deep, attacks, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of another attacking creature. If that creature is a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or Serpent, create 2 of those tokens instead. That's a fantastic ability. So obviously you want to be flipping your commander as soon as you can, which means you want to discard big creatures into your graveyard. There's even some cycling serpents, I think, that would work here as well, where you can cycle them, then put them on top of your library because you want to probably flip your commander as soon as possible. You know, I thought this was such a weird card with how it's a vampire turning into a Kraken, has flying and all of that. That is until I did my Umbris deck tech and I was talking about the card Thing in the Ice. And when you flip over Thing in the Ice, it becomes Awoken Horror. And if you look at the flavor text on here, I'd never noticed this before. It serves as evidence of the ancient power of the deep, a reminder that the sea is the only thing worthy of reverence. Runo Stromkirk. There he is. So I guess that all kind of makes sense. That's his thing, right? Obviously, the, sea creatures tribal here is probably a way you want to go. For me, I really like the creating token copies. Like I said in the spoiler video, a Solemn Simulacrum or a Ravenous Chupacabra or a Muldrifter, right? Getting that extra ETB is always going to be fantastic. Also, these creatures don't go away again after they've been created. They stick around, so that's important as well. So again, just like with Grolnok and just like with Olivia, you can go the tribal theme with this if you want to, or you can just go the super value-y theme where I just put a lot of creatures in here that I want to be making token copies of. So I really like the versatility of it there. Coming in at number 2, Toxrill the Corrosive, 5 black slug horror 7/7. At the beginning of each end step, put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them. Whenever a creature you don't control with a slime counter on it dies, create a 1/1 black slug creature token. And then of course, Wizards of the Coast stuck that little blue pip at the bottom there for us commander players. Pay blue and a black, sacrifice a slug, draw a card. So again, 4 in a row here of commanders where you can go slug tribal with this. There are a couple slugs you can throw in this deck, as I talked about in the deck tech I already did for this guy, but more so I think this is a I just want to kill my opponent's creatures theme so that I can get slugs, right? So yes, you are ultimately going to be playing slug tribal, but because you're going to be making your own slugs is more the case. Already talked about this guy at length. He's a fantastic commander, really interesting build around. I got a deck tech for him already. Check it out if you want to. But moving on to our number 1 commander, Geralt Visionary Stitcher. That's right, I think this guy's the best commander from the set. 2 in a blue, human wizard, 1/4. Zombies you control have flying. And again, this is the top 5 commanders all have a similar theme here where it seems like an obvious tribal theme, but actually it isn't. Because yes, you're giving your zombies flying, but I don't think you want to put a whole lot of zombies in this deck. You want to make creatures into zombies, as the art suggests, right? That's what Gerald does. He makes creatures into zombies. He's essentially, I guess, Victor Frankenstein. Pay a blue and tap, sacrifice another non-token creature, create an XX blue zombie creature token where X is a sacrifice creature's toughness. I think that's a fantastic build around. And as I said in the spoiler video for this, I think walls is a fantastic theme here. I throw a wall of junk in play, 2 mana 0/7. I can then sacrifice it and turn it into a 7/7 flying zombie. That's terrifying. And also you can steal your opponent's creatures. I already did a deck doctor for one of my patrons. They very quickly threw a deck together for this after watching my spoiler video, and I did a deck doctor and they had a steal creature theme in there as well, which I thought was interesting. So I can steal my opponent's creatures, a la, Yasova Dragonclaw, for example. Do a similar theme there. I take my opponent's creatures, then I sacrifice them, turn them into zombies. That also works here. So there is a couple of different ways you can go with this. I think it's a fantastic commander. I love that it's cheap. I can get it out right away and start going to town. The ability is not difficult to activate. I can untap it, do it a couple of times in a turn with a 1,000-year elixir or something like that. I actually like that it's mono blue. As I said to my patrons, I love that they kept this guy mono blue and didn't just add in black to make it a lot easier to build around. I think there's enough going on here already where you can make a very interesting mono blue deck. And I guess the other interesting thing about it is there's not going to be a whole lot of mono blue decks that are going to be like this. It's going to be very different from any other mono blue deck you've ever seen, I think. And I really like that about it as well. So that is it for today. That is my top picks for commanders from Innistrad Crimson Vow. I'm also going to do something a little different here. I have a poll in the description below because I always get requests from people. I'll do a deck tech and people will say, hey, well, what about this commander? Can you do this one? So out of these commanders, and of course not Toxrill because I already did that one, which one do you guys want me to make a deck with? Go vote in the poll, and the winner of that poll I will make a deck with in the next couple of weeks and post it up on my channel. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.